Andrew Borowiak, sorry. And he has a controversial book of photography of Wheeling, which explores the sort of the blight that we're all trying to overcome at present. So he's going to take a look back and see how far we've come. And then in 2 weeks, on the 17th of August, 40 Patchtown, which is a novel by Damien Dressick about the 1922 coal strike in western Pennsylvania. So we're getting close to the Bellaire 100 and the Ruther Pollock Labor Heritage Symposium. And so we're building up to that. This novel is, like I said, about unionization of coal mining in 1922 in the Pennsylvania coal fields. Our guest today is Mr. Daniel Frizzi. He's been a lawyer for 44 years. He's always had an interest in local history and has lectured on local history topics throughout the Ohio Valley for the past 20 years. His hobbies include railroad history and photography, which brings us to the topic at hand. Mr. Frizzi is a past chair of the Great Stone Viaduct Society and Restoration Project in Bellaire, Ohio, the author of several books, and recently helped put together a festival to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the city's Great Stone Viaduct. Here is Daniel Frizzi.
Thank you. Well, hello. Hello. I need to get back to the beginning, right? Thank you for inviting me, and I hope that you'll find the presentation interesting. And this actually is a compilation of many photographs of stone arch bridges of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Many of these photographs are photographs that I've taken, and where appropriate, I'll tell you a little bit about the photograph and how it was obtained. But Baltimore and Ohio stone arch bridges, we're fortunate to have some here in the local area, but there are many that are not far distant from where we are. We're going to be seeing photographs taken in Maryland, Pennsylvania, many in West Virginia. As of course you all know that Wheeling was the site, the western terminus of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in 1852. So there are a lot of bridges between here and Maryland that were stone arch bridges that were built by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Beauty, strength, and symmetry with a distant view and free passage. Those are the things that are most important about these stone arch bridges. Here's the Great Stone Viaduct in Bellaire. We're going to see a lot of these photos. This is not necessarily a particularly good one, but this is one that was taken shortly after we began to clean up the railroad property after we had acquired it from CSX. We're going to talk about different parts of the actual bridge itself. The capstones are at the very top. Here are the capstones. This is the parapet. Here's the keystone right in the center of the arch. The ring stones follow on either side of the keystone. The impost is this little part that sticks out, and this is the pier of all stone arch bridges. They are all designed basically the same way, and they get that design from thousands of years ago when they were first used by the Etruscans in Europe. One of the things that's nice about a stone arch bridge is it affords a view beyond the arch itself. It's like a window that you can see what is beyond. Many railroads built embankments that impeded your ability to move beyond the railroad to the other side of the track. And they also prevented you from seeing what was on the other side. Arches don't have that problem. Here you can see passage, free passage. This is a coal train from the 1950s that's going underneath one of the arches of the stone viaduct in Bellaire. Here you see cars going back and forth on Belmont Street. Here you see an old Bellaire and Wheeling horse-drawn streetcar from back in the 1800s, and stone viaducts in the back. So you were able to get underneath these viaducts. But even though they were built and designed to allow free passage and to allow a view beyond the arch, they didn't sacrifice strength. They could carry heavy loads. And these stone arch bridges were designed so that they could carry railroad traffic of great and heavy loads. To give you some idea of how strong they are, the stone viaduct was built in 1871 in Bellaire, and the iron bridge that originally crossed the Ohio River from Benwood to Bellaire was replaced. The stone viaduct was not. It could carry even the heavier loads. The reason they changed and replaced the superstructure was so that they would be able to carry heavier loads. They didn't have to do that with the stone arches of the viaduct. If there is water to be crossed, you'll find that these stone piers are going to have icebreakers on them. This is a photograph of the original bridge that crossed the river between Bellaire and Benwood back in about 1871. These bridges travel upgrade, downgrade. Here's a picture of Tray Run along the Cheat River and the Bloomington Bridge in Bloomington, Maryland. We're going to cover those in a little more detail. These are flat, basically level stone arch bridges. This one's over Big Walnut Creek in Columbus, Ohio. I have to tell you a little story about this. This is probably the most difficult photograph that I've ever taken, because when the railroad was originally built, they had tremendous difficulty getting across the river and finding an embankment that they could join the bridge to, because it kept crumbling. And I wanted to get a picture of this particular bridge. I had to climb down over that crumbling embankment, lean out over the Big Walnut Creek on a tree branch to be able to get that photo. But it was worth it. It was worth it. Here's a view of a train, helpers coming downhill from at Amblersburg. We're going to talk in detail about the Amblersburg Bridge. But arches can be found everywhere. The picture in the upper left is a picture of the Board Tree Tunnel outside of Glen Easton, down by, between Littleton and Cameron. And then also you see the bridge below, which is on the National Road in Blaine. And then, of course, you see the house that Jack built. The windows, the doorways, they're all made in the form of arches. Now let's talk a little bit about how these bridges were built, because they are all built in basically the same way. We're going to talk about the Lodi Bridge that was built in Ohio in 1904 to 1907. Here you see the piers that were being built. The Lodi Bridge crosses over the Black River, and in order to build the piers over the into the Black River bed, they had to go down like 30 feet because it was all muck before they could get anything solid on which to put the piers. They built the coffer dam to keep water from coming in. Here you see a photograph of the water being pumped out of the caisson because the water, would naturally migrate into those caissons, and they had to keep them dry. That's a photograph of the water being pumped out. They began to build the piers by placing the stone into the caissons and building them up above the level of the ground. They built wood frames for each arch, and it was on those wooden frames that they would hoist the stones into place to be able to construct the stone arches. Here's a photo of the Lodi Bridge when they were building it. It's a 3-arch span, and so they had to build 3 of these frames, wooden frames. Here is how they built the embankments. You can see that they had to have an embankment on each side of the Black River that would join the bridge to those embankments. So they used dinghies and dump cars, and they would back them out on a wooden trestle, and they would dump the fill down over the side on each side of the wooden trestle. The wooden trestle remained still there, but you wouldn't know it because the fill covers it. One of the ways in which they were able to get stone to the actual construction site was they built temporary railroad tracks at the base of the arches. And here you see in this a photo of the railroad track on which the cars that carry the stone would be taken to the construction site. Here are some of the surveyors, English and Italian masons who worked on the building of this bridge. And then, of course, the all-important keystone placement, because it is the keystone that holds the arch in place. If you take the keystone out, the arch would eventually begin to collapse, because it is the keystone that locks into place all of these ring stones, standing shoulder to shoulder. Shoulder to shoulder. This is just another photograph of the stone stockpile and construction track. Here's some of the type of equipment that they used back when they were building these bridges. We're talking the steam era. So we have a Marion shovel. You can see the smokestack. Okay, it was operated by coal and steam. And then you see a pile driver. Once again, steam operated. You see the boiler in the back with the black smoke coming off the smokestack. These are some of the dinghies that lined up to take their load of fill material out onto that trestle and dump their loads over the side. Here the bridge is getting more complete. The parapet, they're working on the parapet and also the capstones. And then this is the completed Lodi Bridge over the Black River. It's, I think that says 96 feet high and 300 feet long. This is a much better photo than those that I've shown you. This is the bridge as it appears today. And there is an aerial view of that bridge. The unfortunate thing about many of these stone arch bridges, it's very difficult to get a good photograph of them because of trees. When we get to talking about the Hempfield Bridge out here, you know, it's so hard to get a good photo of that bridge because of trees and highways. And so if you have a drone, many people use their drones, and so the drones are what give us a lot of the better views these days. Okay, so I want to tell you that these photographs that I've shown you of the building of the Lodi Bridge, I received those from a relative who lives in California, whose grandfather worked on the building of that bridge as one of the Italian stonemasons. He was from Bellaire. He died in Bellaire. His name was Roman. But let's talk about the B&O bridges of other locations. The Carrollton Viaduct, that's the B&O's oldest stone arch bridge. It was constructed in 1828 at Baltimore, Maryland. It's still there. It still carries the trains of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Here's another example of a bridge. This is at Mount Airy, and I believe this is the beginning of the Patapsco Creek, which flows down through Baltimore. And here you see it has a dual purpose. It's made so that you could bring a road through it, and you could also bring on the other side the creek. Still used. Now this is a photograph of the Thomas Viaduct. This also is over in Maryland. I believe it's Elk Ridge, Maryland. This is America's first multiple stone arch railroad bridge. I took and it goes over the Patapsco River. This is not on the original B&O main line. This bridge actually is at the junction of the old B&O main line and the line that was built to Washington, D.C. And we'll see that in some later photos. I was fortunate enough the day that I was there to get a couple of trains passing in each direction. This is the Baltimore and Ohio Station and Hotel that used to be there. Now, if you look behind the hotel, you see there's a high embankment. That's because there's a railroad track coming out this way. That was the line from Wheeling. And until the Thomas Viaduct was built, that's where you went, was to Baltimore. This is the direction of Baltimore, this way. This line comes to Washington, D.C., south. And the line behind that hotel would have eventually come to Wheeling. That hotel and station is no longer there. The monument is still there. The monument today, I took these photographs. It was a lasting tribute to the design engineer Benjamin H. Latrobe, who designed that Thomas Viaduct. Some thought the viaduct was ill-conceived, and so they referred to it as Latrobe's Folly. Some people still lack appreciation of what that monument stands for, as you can see from the graffiti. Thank goodness we haven't suffered that problem here with most of our local stone arch bridges. Maryland, Cumberland, Maryland. If you start in Cumberland, Maryland, this is the direction that the old main line went over the mountains to Grafton and then on up to Wheeling, at the time, Virginia. This is a photograph of that bridge, that same bridge, as it passes over Wills Creek coming out of the mountains. This is a photo that I took of a train descending 17-mile grade in Maryland. This train is crossing over the Big Savage River just before it makes its confluence with the Potomac River. You can see the Bloomington Viaduct is a stone arch bridge. You can see that it has three arches. This train is going very slow because it has about a mile behind it loaded coal hoppers, and they're still up on the mountain coming down. This is that same bridge, a different train, but the same bridge. I'm not that quick to get from where I was. So this was on another day. You see over here the marker that marks the state line, okay? I don't know if you can make that out. It says West Virginia. Okay, so what that's telling you is if you're going in the opposite direction of that train, you get to that marker, you're crossing the West Virginia state line. Okay, on the other side of that sign, it'll say Maryland. So let that train know that it's crossing the Maryland state line. One of the things that's interesting about this particular bridge, when it was built in 1851, it was only designed to carry 2 railroad tracks. Well, the south face of the bridge was widened in 1916, and there was a concrete structure placed on the south side of the bridge. You can see the concrete structure here. Okay, this is what that concrete structure looks like from the south side. Some interesting facts. It's made of sandstone. Unlike the Thomas Viaduct was made of granite, but this bridge was made of sandstone. There are 3 arches that span what says here, the north branch of the Potomac. I think either I'm in error today or I was in error when I typed it. I think it's the Savage River. There's a concrete addition on the south side. The arches are 56-foot spans. The track is 28 feet above the water, and it's a state line at the east end of the bridge. This next bridge is probably my most favorite. I love this bridge. This is called the Tray Run Viaduct. How many people have ever seen it? How many people have been to Rollsburg? If you've been to Rollsburg, if you come down out of Kingwood, okay, to the road that runs along the river, the Cheat, okay, and you go toward Rollsburg, you'll pass this viaduct high up on the hill, the bank of the hill, the mountain actually. This Tray Run Viaduct, this arch bridge was built in 1905. There was an original bridge there that was made out of iron, and it was replaced several times. This particular Tray Run was very, very difficult to cross, to ford. When it was built, you can see the river below. That's the Cheat River. This is looking down grade toward Rollsburg. Rollsburg would be up here. Okay, and this is going downhill. This is a photograph of the bridge along the Cheat River when it was be heading toward west toward Tunnelton, West Virginia. Anybody know where Tunnelton is? Okay. Unfortunately, you can't get these kind of photographs today. That photograph that I showed you here, I was there about 2 years ago, stood in the same location. You could not see the bridge because of all of the trees. They had grown up completely above it. So the only way we could actually get a photo of it was to send up a drone. And it was a foggy day and we couldn't see the drone, and so we didn't really want to get too close to the tree. Some interesting facts about Tray Run. It was originally a cast iron support bridge in 1852 when the original line to Wheeling was built. It was replaced by wrought iron trestle in 1887, and then the sandstone was built in 1905. It has 4 arches. It's 148 feet high above the Cheat River and 445 feet long. The photograph that I'm going to show you now is what you'd see from the road if you know where to stop. There's a historic marker right along the road. And if you stop there, you'll be able to see the bridge if it's in the wintertime. You're not going to be able to see it or see it well at this time of year. There's just too much foliage. But I tell you a little story. My 2 boys, when they were young, were with me. We stopped the car down by the historic marker, and I was getting the camera set up. And they had scampered up Tray Run. And when I found them, they were almost to the top of the grade where the tracks were. Excuse me. But this is one of my favorite bridges. This is the most recent photograph that I have taken. This I took about a month, 5 weeks ago, 5-6 weeks ago. To get this photograph, I had to bicycle 16 miles, and I had to get permission to go across some other people's property. This photograph is taken on the Youghiogheny River between Connellsville and Ohio Pile. There is no other way to get to it. There are no roads. There is a camp that's on this side of the river where I took the photograph. And I had to get permission from the camp owners to be able to get there. And it's just such a beautiful location, and the water is so placid. If you look at the reflection, it almost looks like there's 2 bridges there. I was fortunate enough to have a train passing while I was there. And once again, the reflection, in the water is really, really beautiful. So that's the bridge at Indian Creek. Now, this is not on the original main line of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. This is on the line between Cumberland and Pittsburgh. Okay, so you're not going to get that if you go through what this is in Pennsylvania. Trains still travel, as you can see. Amtrak goes right over that bridge every day that it runs. Used to run every day of the week. Last time I saw it was like 3 times a week. But it still passes over that bridge. The next bridge that I wanted to talk about was Amblersburg Viaduct. This bridge was built in 1865. This is on the old main line of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Some facts about Amblersburg Viaduct. It's a bridge over top of a bridge. The bridge below is actually a township road. that you can actually travel on. The first time that I'd ever seen it, I was a little leery of crossing it. A few years later, when I went back, the bridge had been improved, and so then you could actually get across it safely with a vehicle. But it's a single arch bridge. You can see that it's had to be supported over the years because of the decay of the arch itself. So they put steel supports along the side, and they put tie rods through the ballast of the bridge and connected them on each side. This is the point at which the steepest part of Cranberry Grade up to Terra Alta begins. So when you're at Amblersburg, you're right where the mountain really starts to get steep for the railroad. Here's a photograph of a train coming up the side of that mountain. This was taken in the 1990s. Unfortunately, the signal tower is gone, so you're not going to have the same effect as what this photo does. If you're going to try to find this viaduct, it's very easily missed. When you leave Whirlsburg, you're going to cross over the river, and you're going to follow the road toward Terra Alta along Salt Lick Creek. Okay, you're going to come up over a rise, and you're going to go down. If you're traveling a little too fast, you're going to pass the bridge. You're going to go right past it because it's off on your left, and you have to kind of look over your shoulder to see it. So it's easily missed. Okay, now here's a bridge that everyone probably recognizes as Wheeling's Hempfield Railroad Viaduct, constructed 1857. This was a viaduct that allowed the railroad to come from Washington, Pennsylvania, into Wheeling. This would be 5 years after the B&O had already reached Wheeling. And this line was important due to the fact that the B&O wanted to be able to connect to Pittsburgh. Since they couldn't go direct, they wanted to be able to connect through this line, and this bridge was built. You can see the tunnel. Here are some photographs showing the bridge. It's difficult to view because of trees and the highway. This is the Chessie steam train, and I'm not sure what year this was taken, but this is on its way to Pittsburgh. The bridge was designed by Charles Ellet. You all know who Charles Ellet is, right? Designer of the first Wheeling suspension bridge. But now I'm going to take you to another bridge that is a particularly important bridge to me, and that's the bridge that's in my hometown of Bellaire, Ohio. This is a photograph on the north side, north view, looking southwest of the Great Stone Viaduct. It was built in 1870 to 1871. Now, some people say, well, you know, the bridge across the river, they started building it in 1868, which is true. But the viaduct didn't begin construction until 1870. And in 1870, they began the construction. And if you assume the construction began in January, this bridge, all 43 arches, were completed by April of the following year. So it didn't take them long to build this bridge. Here's another photo showing it from Hamilton Street. You're looking at the north side of the bridge. The little insert up in the top was a photograph that my wife took during a snowstorm. It was a pretty picture, and so I thought I'd put that in. This is a picture of the south view, and you can see the arches curving gracefully to the west. This railroad track was built by the joint cooperation of the Baltimore and Ohio and the Central Ohio Railroad. The Central Ohio Railroad ran to Columbus, Ohio, 137 rail miles further west. And so this part of the viaduct curves to the west. Here you'll see a photograph of taken probably back around the turn of the century You can see that the viaduct was a gathering place for many people. They duck under the viaduct whenever a steam locomotive would come by on top of the bridge. These are some photographs of railroad locomotives crossing the viaduct. And you see in this photo here, you'll see a viaduct in the back. Okay, it's not a particularly pretty viaduct, but it was built by the Cleveland, Lorraine, and Wheeling Railroad to intersect with the Stone Viaduct at Guernsey Street. That railroad line is still in operation. This is a photograph that was taken in 1872, 1 year after the bridge was built. And you can see all 43 arches stretching from Rose Hill to Union Street in Bellaire, and then from there, the original iron bridge that crossed the Ohio River. And then on the other side, you can see the railroad curving to the south toward Benwood. This is just another photograph. One of the things we've tried to do is preserve the past and preserve some remnant of the glorious past of the railroad in Bellaire. And this is a train that's headed west. And you see all the boxcars underneath. That is now property that the Great Stone Viaduct owns. Here's a camel locomotive. This is not a Winans camel, this is a Davis camel. And this was in the pipe yard, which is on the property that our society now owns. This is another photograph showing a double-headed steam locomotives, 2 American Standards 440s, coming from the west into Bellaire. Now, here you can see the Keystone. There's the Keystone, 1870. That's where the construction of the viaduct began. That Keystone is in the second arch at Union Street. There were 41 more arches built for a total of 43 arches. Each arch is 33.4 feet on center. It was Ohio sandstone that was quarried locally. The arch construction commenced at Union Street in 1870, completed in June of 1871. Actually, it was completed in April of 71, but the first trains actually ran in June of 1871. We just had our 150th anniversary, celebrating the 150 years of this bridge. There's a story about the number of stones. There are 36 ring stones with 1 keystone for a total of 37 stones. The bridge across the Ohio River was constructed just after the Civil War. And each of those stones represents 1 state in the United States of America at the time of construction of the bridge. Here's an example of how you can see the J Tower, where the railroad line that goes to the north is here. Okay, and then this is going west. Okay. This is simply the other photo simply shows you coming across the bridge from West Virginia. This is a photograph of a rail fan train that left Columbus, Ohio. I believe this was back in the early 70s. And they took a trip to Benwood from Columbus. And this is a photograph of that train crossing over the viaduct. There you see at the top a good example of the Cleveland, Lorraine, and Wheeling traffic that's still in operation today approaching the viaduct. The photo below shows the locomotive coming back from Benwood. That actually was the Wheeling and Lake Erie Christmas train. And I went out on the viaduct to be able to get that photo. Here you see J Tower, you see the two railroad lines converging at Guernsey Street, right here. And that's a coal train that's headed from one of the mines across the river toward West Virginia. This photograph here is one of J.J. Young's photographs that he sent to me when I was writing the very first book that I wrote. He sent me that photograph of two Baldwin sharks waiting its turn to get across the bridge. You can see here there are two sets of tracks. There's only one set of tracks that remains today. These are just different street views, and I don't want to. Here's the most important part. The rail train arrived to tear up the rails in 1996, early September 1996. This was the first locomotive set that was sent by CSX to start to tear those rails up. And this is a photograph that I took on a rainy day in September when the last train was pulling up the rails. This is the last locomotive set to ever cross the viaduct on the portion of the Newark subdivision. The rest of the viaduct still was in operation by Wheeling Lake Erie, but this part, these were the last trains. So we acquired about 10 years ago, a long time ago. We've all gotten older since then. We acquired or began negotiating with CSX to buy the property where the viaduct sits, and also to purchase the viaduct itself and the rail bed and the train yard below it. If any of you are familiar with Bellaire, the yard below it, this area here was known as the pipe yard. There used to be many pipes that were left laying here in the pipe yard. And so we acquired this portion of the right-of-way, and we've acquired that part of the bridge that goes out toward Guernsey Street. 20 of the 43 arches the Great Stone Viaduct Society now owns. And our plan is to develop that into a walking trail from 26th Street all the way out onto the viaduct to a turnaround where you can actually walk out on the viaduct, which is really a treat. Few people have had the chance to do it, and it really is a sight to behold. We're going to do that. This is what the segment 1 design plan looks like. You can see that the red is the trail. There'll be a parking area here along 26th Street. This will be the trail that's red. And when we get to the abutment here, the blue is what will actually be built on top of the viaduct. So we've undertaken some efforts to clean the bridge, tuck point the bridge. We're going to be entering into another contract to replace some stone before the actual construction on top begins. One of the things that we discovered, which we had no idea of, is that there are mason marks placed in many of these stones that are that were used to build the viaduct. Now this is not graffiti. These were marks that were placed by the stonemasons who actually cut the stones and then had them hoisted into place. How do we know that? Because some of these stones are clear up on top of the arches or in the parapet. So, nobody could have gone up there and chiseled their name in the stone. It had to be done when the stones were on the ground. You can see some of these marks. You can see perhaps these here. Here is this is actually like a Christmas tree. And you can barely make it out with some initials. This is a cube. I don't know if you can see that. Here is a square. Here is a square, and then, so it's a cube, and there's somebody's initials, AC, marked below that. We've learned that many of the stonemasons have their own marks, and they would put their marks into stones that they had worked We would like to find out if there's a book that has these people and their marks in them so that we can identify them, but probably aren't going to be able to do that. This is a photograph that I took just last month at our celebration. We lit the bridge. We've lit the bridge several times. And I have to tell you a funny story. I took my thumb drive to get some photos made out at Walmart. And you put your thumb drive in, then you pick the pictures you want, and then they come out behind the counter. And the young fellow that was behind the counter came out and he said, you went to Europe. I said, no. I said, no. I said, actually, you can see that too. I said, it's right down in Bellaire, Ohio. This is a photograph that I took on the final night that we lit the bridge. And this photo, I put this photo on display. The Belmont County Photography Club is sponsoring a showcase of photographs down at the Moundsville Museum, and they're on display down there. So I want to get down there later this week to see that photo. But the viaduct, I can understand why, because I've had many people look at photographs and they can't believe that something that beautiful, is here. And this is another photo that was taken by a photographer, not mine, but a friend of my wife's. This is what the area looked like in the 1950s. That's what it looked like in the 1950s. You see the pipes, you see the trees, the sumac trees, the locust trees. You see all the rails. You see the piles of sand or silica that was probably being used at Imperial Glass. This is that same view today. So it's 150 years old. If any of you liked the presentation, I brought, this was a PowerPoint that I put together for our celebration. We have copies here at the table. I have more if anybody would like those. They're $20. Whatever you pay for those goes towards the renovations and restorations of our bridge and the continuation of our project. Okay, that's all I have to say about that. If anybody has questions, I'll be happy to try to answer. Yes, sir. The project has been funded through TAP grant from the Ohio Department of Transportation. That is part of the federal highway program. And that's where we've gotten the money that's going to allow us to actually afford, build the trail, build the walkway on top of the bridge, put the fencing, the decorative fencing up. But there's been a lot of local people who have contributed lots of money to our being able to make this happen. We've used those funds as matching funds. And our state representative, Jack Serra, he was able to get some funds for Capitol Bill, which of course we have to put matching funds toward. So all the donations that we've received help us, with that, with our matching funds. Yes, sir.
How long is the you own all the land on either side before that?
We own about 5 acres of ground. 5 acres, which would consist of the pipe yard between 30. If the best place for you to get an idea of what we own is to go to the Bellaire Clinic at the south end of Guernsey Street. You go into the Bellaire Clinic or Bellaire Health. I forget what they call it now. Bellaire Health Center. And you drive around to the back to the parking lot, And that's where you're going to get the best view of the viaduct, and you'll be able to see all the property that we own on the other side of that viaduct. So it's about 5 acres. That includes the trail.
Is that where Imperial Glass was, though?
Imperial Glass, the mall, the little shopping plaza, Imperial Plaza. That's where the Imperial was. That's where Imperial was. This was the pipe yard.
Yeah.
The property that we've acquired basically was at one time a junkyard and a pipe yard, a scrap yard. Somebody else have a question?
I was just going to ask you, do you have any idea of the original cost of building?
I don't have it on my fingertips, but it is in Caldwell's History of Belmont and Jefferson County. You'll be able to get it. It'll tell you exactly. And it'll give you a lot more. And then also I wrote a book, and I wrote a couple of books, and there's a lot of information in those books, but I don't have that at my fingertips. Anyone else? Ed? There is a bridge that I don't know that it has more arches, but there's a bridge in Pennsylvania over the Susquehanna River, and it was originally a Pennsylvania Railroad bridge. And I believe that bridge is longer, but I'm not sure how many arches it has.
Rock Island.
And you know how many arches it has? Yeah, it crosses a long span. There also is another fairly famous railroad bridge in Minneapolis. Yeah, but I don't know. I think the longest is the one over the Susquehanna River. I'm kind of partial to our bridge there. Anyone else? Yes.
Where was Runaway Train filmed?
Where was Runaway Train?
Movie.
Oh, the movie? You're talking about Unstoppable. Okay, Unstoppable, the movie was filmed coming across the bridge, across the Ohio River, and it came onto the stone viaduct over to Guernsey Street in Bellaire. And at Guernsey Street, it went north on the steel superstructure. In the movie, it was called the Stanton Curve. And but it did cross over the part of the stone viaduct that's still in use and operation from Union Street, Belmont Street, Guernsey Street, and from there it's north. Yes?
With regard to the marks you found on the stones, some of them were probably put there by the English stonemasons. I'm not sure about the Italian stonemasons, but that's a
not in Bellaire. Most likely it was Irish stonemasons in Bellaire.
Well, I think that some of them were probably masons.
Correct.
Besides being
Yeah.
stonemasons. They found stones very similar to that. Of course, when they were redoing the White House during the Truman administration, they found some of the stones of the White House were with the maker's marks on them.
Right. Well, the Lodi Bridge was built using Italian stonemasons. The bridge in Bellaire, there's a kind of a dispute whether it's Italian or whether it was Irish. I think it probably was Irish at that time, due to the fact that the Irish stonemasons moved west as the railroad was being built. So they kept coming further west for more work with the railroad. But yes, the keystone actually has a Masonic the square on it. But one of the problems with that is the railroad does not take care of their property like you would take care of your house. One of the things that's really important to know about this particular bridge is that this is the original stonework. What we own is the original stonework. The stonework beyond what we own, okay, that's now owned by the railroad, they came in with a company that gunnited the side of the stones. you know, and that was the cheapest way for them to try to protect the viaduct. Well, unfortunately, that looks awful. And when the man came and got in his boom truck and went up and started his work on Union Street to gunite that, I made it a point to go down and holler at him and make him come down out of his boom truck so that I could say that keystone is historical. You don't want to cover that up. So he didn't cover it up. But unfortunately, the gunite was running and it, you know, streaked down over top of the keystone.
I think that's what they did with the bridge in Elm Grove at Monument Place too. When the state, way back, they used something like gunite on top of the original sandstone block.
Yeah.
They're taking that off now as part of the $3.2 million restoration project.
Yeah, yeah. It would have been better to do it at the time rather than restore it at the time the proper way than to. But that's one of the things that we're particularly proud of about this part of the bridge that we own. It is the original stonework. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.